I wish that I could swim and sleep like a shark does. I'd fall to the bottom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Comprehensible Input podcast, where we have interesting conversations with interesting people about interesting topics in English that we can all understand. Today, we're talking about trains, and our very special guest is Mark. Mark, hello.
Hiya, hi.
Hi. All right. First of all, can you just give us a bit of background? Can you tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, so where to start? I graduated from the University of Aberdeen with a degree in European Studies, so sort of German, Spanish, international relations. After that, after graduating, I moved to Russia where I taught English for about nearly 19, 20, nearly 20 years. The war happened. I stayed in Russia for maybe 2, 3 months after that, and then I moved to China, to Shanghai, where I'm currently based.
Before we get into trains, as I understand, you're quite a language enthusiast. As I remember, you speak German. I know that you speak Russian. You live in China at the moment. Have you picked up any Chinese?
A few words, but the thing is that, and partly a bit laziness, a bit on my part, unfortunately. But what you have to consider is that 20 years ago, wherever you were, Russia, China, there was more motivation to learn the language. For example, you're going to buy a train ticket to St. Petersburg or to Shanghai, to Beijing. You had to look up the phrase book. You had to write those phrases down, learn them, learn what you wanted to say, and hope for the best. I remember when I first bought a train ticket from Moscow to Vienna in 2003. I learned all those, I wrote down the phrases, I rehearsed them, Я хочу билет на поезд номер 21, whatever. And I said all that. There's a queue of people behind me, and I say this, and of course, the woman at the counter, she says to me, "Вы прекрасно говорите по-русски, очень хорошо. Ну, жалко, мест нет." No,
For a quick translation, the woman said, "Oh, you speak Russian wonderfully, but unfortunately, we don't have any places."
so then I'm thinking, what do I do now? What do I say? Now, unfortunately, she helped me out, and there was another solution. But they were the things that we were faced with. Now, of course, in China, you use your WeChat Translate, you go into a noodle bar, 100 different things on the menu, whatever. You just scan, get the picture, and then you just sort of point at what you want as well. I think, yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, I'm still learning a few. Sometimes I watch like these sort of mini Chinese films or film series, and you sort of pick out the odd word or something, and yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. It's nice to have this technology, but I do think it takes away that urgency, that
Yeah,
immediacy of needing to use that language.
yeah.
But of course, we could speak about the different languages, but we're here to speak about trains. I remember one of the first, maybe even the first time we met, you asked me this question, like, "Are you a train enthusiast?" or something like that, and I thought, like, that's an interesting conversational gambit.
Mm,
So,
okay.
how did you first become interested in trains?
Childhood, really. I mean, well, I was born up in Scotland. My father was working for one of the insurance companies at the time. I think it was General Accident. My dad's from Hull, East Yorkshire, East Riding, and my mum's from Newcastle. And I was born up in Scotland. How do I identify myself? Born Scot, ethnic Northerner, adapted Londoner. Actually, I was actually made in London, so just to complicate things there. So, of course, my mum didn't drive. So when she went down to see my grandma, we had to take the train. And so I think that's probably where my, where it all began, really just from early childhood.
I I still have my memory, my first memory of taking a train, right? I'm from a town called Caerphilly, which is like a little suburb of Cardiff. It's about, maybe 8 miles, 13, 14 kilometers away. And I remember my mum was taking me and my older brother to Cardiff. And I remember I had no interest in going to Cardiff at all, but we were going to go on the train. And it was my first experience of the train, and the kind of bus station connects to the train. And I remember having like this sense of excitement and this even sense of fear of like going beyond the gate and getting on this like monstrosity of a train or something. Do you have any like early memory of anything similar to this of getting on a train?
Yeah, it's interesting that, I mean, I think childhood, we all have early childhood memories, but those early childhood memories are like what I would call maybe just like one image. Whereas as we get older, our memories tend to flow together. So, for example, let's just say, for example, last night, we were in Weatherspoons, and we laughed at something happened. We laughed at something that happened. There will be a flow of memories. What happened before that incident? What happened at that incident? What happened after that? Oh, what did you do after Weatherspoons? Went and we got a kebab, etc. So yeah, go back to your original question. I do have we moved down to London when I was about 3, and I do remember the train coming into Perth at night, this sort of big blue diesel as it was back then, with a rake of sleeping coaches. And then my next memory was just like waking up, looking out the window, and then seeing the sign "Welcome to London Euston." This was back, I think, in 1983. Um, and just sort of various memories. I think I remember when we got off the train in Perth, and I remember seeing the train go over the bridge again. It was one of the sort of the big blue diesels, Class 47, if I remember. Class 40, I think, pulled us from Perth to somewhere outside Glasgow, I think Moss End, where we changed over for the electric for the juice down to the big smoke. And then just remember seeing the train go over. I think it was a Glasgow, yeah, probably a Glasgow Aberdeen service. So yeah, it's just those sort of random memories. I think I remember when I was about 6 years old at my local station, Orpington, seeing this engine go through with a rake of coaches, and just sort of looking at that, thinking, "Oh, what's that?" Now the southern region at the time, going back to sort of the mid 80s, it was pretty boring. It was just all these electric trains radiating out from, a bit like now, really, radiating out from London, heading down to sort of, Dover, Folkestone, Ramsgate, Margate, and then seeing this sort of diesel with thrashing through my local station with a rake of coaches, and that was like one of the new cross London services. So, for example, Folkestone to Manchester or Ramsgate to Liverpool, sort of the northeast southwest connections. They weren't very frequent, and I don't know much about them. I saw them as and when. But I think they might have been originally timed to arrange with the ferry crossings. So it was the idea of them was really this working, um, really, so people could avoid crossing London, basically.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Makes sense. Obviously, you've lived in a few different countries, and I imagine you've experienced like quite a few different rail networks. I want to ask you if you have any like particular enjoyable memory of a special train journey. Like I remember once in 2009 taking the train from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Unfortunately, there'd been like a terrorist attack on the rails, so we were stuck on this train for about 16 hours. I don't think I'll ever forget that train journey.
Hmm.
But do you have anything that comes to mind when you think of like a super memorable journey?
Loads. Where do I start? I think one of my first journeys in sort of the summer of sort of 2016. I remember sort of flying to Novosibirsk in order to pick up the BAM from Moscow, from Novosibirsk across to Komsomolsk, na Amur, and then down to Vladivostok. I wanted to originally continue on the train to Sovietska Gavan, and then possibly take the ferry across to Japan or whatever, fly back from there. But of course, typical Russian fashion. I think, as you were in Russia as well. So of course, a typical only in Russia was when I went to Rizhskaya station in Moscow to sort of organize the tickets, and she said, "Oh, there is no train." So what do you mean there's no train? It's a daily train. There's no train. Okay, fine. And of course, there was a few calling a few numbers, comes back and says, no, we can confirm that this train's not running. Fine. So I went home and rearranged everything at the station. Went home later, only to find on 22.ru that the train was running. So again, but anyway, so yeah, that was a memorable journey, just traveling across that complete wilderness. There are maybe across the whole railway, I don't know how long it is, maybe let's say 3,000 kilometers, sake of argument, from Brat, from the junction across to Komsomolsk, and only maybe 9 relatively large settlements. So you're just traveling through this complete wilderness. So that was one journey that was memorable. Another journey was, well, my first journey, the one that I mentioned, buying the ticket to Vienna. There was a carriage for Bratislava, which was just an hour outside Vienna. So I could catch a train to Vienna and then pick up a train to Zurich later that morning, the 11:30, I think it was. So anyway, so got on the train, and of course it was a the train was completely full, but there was only one. And then I think there was a compartment. My compartment, I think, had a leak or some water. So the conductor said to me, "Oh, well, would you mind sharing this compartment with this Czech girl who was a Slovak model?" And so, of course, and the Slovak railway crew, they said, right, we had a party in the carriage. Of course, I remember one of my memories is being carried up Minsk platform at 6 in the morning. On on a very cold late December, like 23rd of December, being carried up Minsk platform, and just feeling sort of totally hungover the next day. And of course, when we got to I think Katowice, the train for Prague, that continued on to Prague. The carriages for Vienna and Bratislava were uncoupled to wait for subsequent trains, and so of course our conductor. We were the last two people on the train, so the conductor, the sleeping carriage attendant, took us out to the local pub. So that was a memorable experience. Yeah, so I think they're probably two journeys. So one journey traveling across Siberia to the far east of Russia, and another journey from Russia traveling across Europe. A couple of journeys in China. I went up to the Harbin Ice Festival, and about 1 o'clock in the morning, in the pub, received a message: your flight's been cancelled. And then I thought, what are the options for getting up to Harbin? I could have rearranged everything, but I didn't really want to rearrange the booking, rearrange the tour. So I jumped on WeChat, and I found a high-speed train from Shanghai up to Harbin. I think the journey was about 12 hours or so on the high-speed train. The only option was business class. So having the equivalent of an airline business class long haul on a 12-hour train journey, I thought, you know what? It's expensive, but you know what? it's quite cheap for the distance that you're traveling. It was about maybe 300 quid or 350 quid, which is a lot of money. But in the grand scale of things, if you walked to Cardiff and say, right, I want a first class single to Edinburgh, how much is that going to cost?
Yeah, I
And you,
wouldn't like
and
to think. I would say you wouldn't get change of 500 or 600 pounds.
yeah. So that was a memorable journey. And another journey was traveling to Chongqing, a city in China, known as the Blade Runner city, because, for example, you could be on the 40th floor on the roof of a building. You look down and you see like a road below. That was last summer, and I took, of course, the what they call in China, the green trains. So, that was a good chance to actually see the country, to see the Yangtze, to see the country rather than just have it whiz past at 350 kilometers an hour. Um, which, yeah, and then yeah, there was my first train journey in China. Was the May holiday. It was 2023, so after the COVID laws had all been stopped, people could travel without having codes like health codes. So, and of course, everyone telling me how punctual the Chinese trail network is. And so I got the train from Shanghai down to Shenzhen, across from Hong Kong, and the train made good time. And then I think we were delayed for maybe 6 or 7 minutes outside Shenzhen because of station congestion. But yeah.
Nice. You obviously have a quite a rich experience of traveling on trains. Does that interest like expand outwards? Do you do any other things like do you do train photography or do you study network maps or anything like this?
Um, sure. Well, I mean, I think really from sort of the childhood interest as a child, that sort of really broadened out to sort of, my interest in sort of, modern history, the roles that the railway played in, well, of course, the industrialization of Europe, the UK, the Industrial Revolution, um, how the railways played a role in unifying the Germanic states under Bismarck. And of course, the role of the railways in World War One was to transport the troops east, have this swift victory, and then to take the trains, and then to take the trains west. Um, so that's why there was an east-west rail network in Germany. Either it was to defeat France and then move to Russia or vice versa, that I can't remember. And then also, of course, of course, and the unfortunate role that the railways played in transporting what was deemed by the Nazis as human cargo. Um, why was Auschwitz, or this Polish railway junction, Oswiecim, why was it chosen to be one of the world's most notorious death camps? Well, I just said the answer. A railway junction. You had like railway lines, east, west, north, south, northeast, northwest, all converging together. That's why it was chosen. It was a railway junction. But yeah, certainly, I'm a member of, I think, some model railway groups, sort of online, and also one of the gauges that I model is sort of the N gauge, which is the smaller one. I'm a member of the N gauge society, just giving me access maybe to certain models that aren't sold officially. And it's more like a consultancy group as well. So if you have problems with certain things not running properly or whatever, then people are always available to help. And of course, yeah, photography as well. Yeah, rail photography, studying sort of network maps as well. Yeah, certainly, looking at just sort of sometimes just the style of maps. What I did at one point was try to collect the official maps from each railway country that I visited. So, for example, the Czech Republic having a Czech railway map, or Polish railway map, German, Austrian. Um, Yes, that's something I used to do. And also, yeah, so it was rail photography as well.
So I want to move on and talk a bit about perceptions of people like yourself who are interested in trains, right? Like
Hmm.
maybe the same for you, but growing up, like we had this word train spotter, and train spotter
Yeah,
was considered to be like a person that's a bit uncool or socially awkward. It has negative connotations.
yeah,
Why do you think some people, find it weird if people are
yeah,
interested in trains, but not the same if they're interested in like ships or planes or something like this?
yeah. I mean, I think when I was going back, I think it was all sort of started in the 90s. I think remember children's BBC, that had something, the anorak. Um,
Mm.
and then this sort of badly dressed, loud, obnoxious character. And then, of course, and then there were articles appearing in, I think, the Times, the Guardian, about the fact that, um, ADHD, Asperger's, and how people with those sort of conditions tend to have, maybe very specific interests, or because the way their mind works, they might be very focused on detail. So, of course, you know, people put rail enthusiasts, people, very, can I say, sort of very precise hobby, people wanting to do, and yeah, there was that sort of label put on. I think, yeah. Um, So I think, that was part of it. Now, the perception of rail enthusiasts now, I don't know what the perception is now in the UK. It might be a generational thing. So, for example, you might see some rail enthusiasts at Cardiff and you might think, oh, the train spotters again, because, you remember the 90s, you remember that. But for example, if I was at school today and I said I like trains, I don't know what people would think, especially if I had a model railway at home now. The model railways 30 years ago, you put your engine on the track and, you turn the controller on and the train went round and that was it. But now, there's also the digitalization of the hobby as well. So, for example, I don't just put my train on the track, but I will have a digital remote or even operating it through my phone, and you can have all the sound effects. So, for example, it's not just the standard motor, the engine, the motor that's going, but for example, a train comes into the station, it leaves the station. I can put all these sound effects on to show that, for example, the doors are closing on the 125, the 125 begins to rev up, um, yeah, and then it starts moving slowly, and of course, the noise then sort of combines with the speed of the engine as well. So you've got all those sound effects, I think, which make it certainly more engaging and more interactive as well. So if I was at school today and I had such a layout, it might not be seen as something that's geeky. It might be seen as something that's really cool, especially because it's linked to digital, which of course is linked to the phones. So it might just be seen as something that's probably interesting rather than sad or nerdy or geeky or whatever.
Speaking about modern perceptions, I came across this guy. I think he's quite famous, Francis Bourgeois. I think he makes TikTok videos. He has
Hmm.
this like weird camera on his face, and he has a strange thing. And he's always at train
Yeah,
stations getting super excited. First of all, do you think he's for real? Do you think he
yeah,
genuinely has
yeah,
this enthusiasm?
yeah.
And is
Now,
he good for this like
yeah, I
community?
remember just coming across him, and I thought he was just, because of his very eccentric, very emotional style, I thought he was just, making fun of railway enthusiasts. I remember like commenting like, oh, someone should just punch him in the face, only to find that, well, actually, one of my friends in China, um, Francis Bourgeois, is his cousin. So I actually know that he is. I think he's always liked trains. Now, either he saw, well, a potential business opportunity during COVID, where he actually researched into the different types of engines that are moving around, and he says, for example, here I am riding behind this Class 37, or I'm at Feltham Station going to video this Class 56 going through. Um, Maybe, but yeah, I think he is a genuine rail enthusiast. I think, yeah, I think he hasn't made the hobby as sad. He's actually, I think, publicized the hobby in quite a good way, actually.
Yeah, he seems to be a likable character. Like a lot of people like him, but I don't know if they like him. Maybe like just geeky things are more popular now. Maybe they're just more acceptable than they were in the
Yeah,
past.
yeah.
Yeah. How do people react when you tell them that you have this interest in trains? Do you ever feel like, do you ever worry that you might be judged for having this interest?
It's weird. I remember just at the end of a night in Moscow, before I was like sitting at the bar. I think just last drink before going home. I remember just, to keep myself awake. I remember just like going through some photos, looking at some photos on my phone. Oh, see, that's quite a cute girl. And then, like, she's just like looking over, what am I doing alone? As that, I'm not drunk or whatever. And then she just looked and she's, oh, they're trains. I'm like, yeah. So, and I just played it down a bit. So, oh, yeah, just a bit of interest. And she said, oh, can I have a look at your photos? And she actually found them quite cool. That's something actually I found in Russia, sort of, some girls actually found it quite interesting. It's like, oh, he actually has a life. He's actually interested in doing something other than drinking vodka and going to the banya. You know? Yeah. Um, Same thing. I think, sort of possibly, sort of the same thing in China as well. I think, the attitude from the girl seems to be as though, well, if you've got a hobby and you focus on that, then you're not going to be out trying to womanize everybody else. Um, I think in the UK, I mean, God, I mean, I've been out the UK for over 20 years now, so I don't really know what the perception is. If I met someone or if I was talking to someone, say 28 or whatever, 27, and I said, oh, I'm a rail enthusiast, what that person would think, bearing in mind that person was born in the late 90s, early 2000s, and grew up without that media perception, that media stereotype. Um, but yeah, I mean, how do I tell people? So I just sort of play it down as a hobby. What are your interests? So, traveling, languages, politics and society, railways, aviation, um, or yeah, railways, aviation. That's how I play it. So it's like one hobby among many, really.
We spoke
That's how I
earlier.
tend to play it, rather than just saying I like trains. So I'm interested in rail transport, the rail transport sector, aviation, um, languages. That's how I play it.
We spoke a bit earlier about the kind of some of the negative effects that new technologies had on language learning. But I imagine in terms of community, right, growing up, if you have a particularly singular interest in something and you're from a small town, it can be difficult to find other people with that interest.
Yeah,
Are you part of any online communities? Like, are there groups of people where they, like on Reddit or Facebook groups or something like this, where you can express openly this enthusiasm?
yeah, yeah. There are plenty of Facebook groups. For example, someone's just tagged me in a group. The Engage support community group. Um, so yeah, I just clicked on Facebook. Was that still okay? Could you still see me?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah. So I think someone. Sometimes it's just people posting about, or the admin might say, right, what's everyone done on their layouts this week, and you might have people just taking pictures of maybe, I don't know, a new station that they've built, or maybe some track work that they've done, or someone might just say, yeah, this is the latest model that I've bought, and yeah, just sort of general sort of things like that. So yeah, So yeah, there is sort of an online community as well. There are plenty of online Facebook groups, for example, Instagram as well. I think there are some sort of um, yeah, meeting people. I mean, I've got people. Um, so a couple of people follow me. I follow a couple of people. Russian railway enthusiasts, for example, German rail enthusiasts as well. So yeah.
I had a student who's like massively into bird watching, right? And she's part of
Hmm.
this community. And
Hmm.
when they know a bird is going to be in a particular place, they have like some type of game or some type of challenge, like who can take a photograph of this bird first. Is there anything like that? Is there any like special models or engines or where you know they're going to be in a particular
Oh,
place and they create some
oh
competition out
yes,
of it?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
just look at, for example, you know that, for example, the Flying Scotsman will be in Cardiff, or the Flying Scotsman will be going through Neath on a train as well. Yeah. So yes, you will get people gathering around, taking videos, whatever. So yeah, there is a lot of that. Some people want to try and do every single railway line in the UK, or I know some people who've done, who are trying to do every single railway line in Europe as well. Yeah. And of course, in the UK, if you want to sort of travel on every single bit of track in the UK, fine, buy an all-line rail rover. Can travel. I don't think I've been up to Caerphilly, for example. That would be easy for me to do. Jump on the train in London, change in Cardiff, go up to Caerphilly, or go up to wherever that line finishes. But the problem is when you've got all these freight lines. So there might be a freight line across, for example, from maybe, I don't know, Leicester to Burton-on-Trent. No passenger trains. So how do you travel on that line, of course? And that's when you go on to like the rail enthusiast special trains. So they might, for example, go over certain bits of line, or they might travel around a certain part of the country going over these sort of long lost freight lines, or lines that aren't used very much. There are plenty of those, I think, still in South Wales, for example.
Nobody tries to sneak on the freight trains illegally.
Um, oh, and the passenger trains. On the freight trains, well, I know that in America, this is actually part of the blues, sort of, people, hobos jumping on the freight trains, jumping in the box cars and just traveling wherever. But no, not in the UK. I think in the UK and Europe, things are a lot more controlled, things are a lot more regulated. So no, there's not really that sort of hobo movement in the UK and Europe the way there was in America, and how the blues partly evolved from that sort of hobo, people jumping in the boxcar, and yeah.
Yeah, you see it a lot in movies, don't you? In like video games and stuff like this. Anyway, I want to get on to a quick fire round. So I'm going to ask you 10 questions and you can give short answers, 1 or 2 words. If you want to expand and give any details about it, feel free to do so. Firstly, the worst train you've been on?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, how do you define worst? I mean, I could say worst in terms of maybe the train just there wasn't anything special about it. Um, I'm trying to. I think it was probably when I sort of travelled from London to Leicester. This was back in 1999. Got on the train. It failed before even leaving St Pancras. We got on another train, and that went as far as I think maybe Market Harborough, and it failed at Market Harborough. So it took me like 3 trains just to have just an hour and a bit journey to Leicester to actually join one of those special trains that I was talking about earlier. So yeah, that was a Class 170. But yeah, in terms of sort of the worst train, something I can't, I will really have to think about that one. I think the majority of journeys I've had have all been, touch wood, have all been. I've always got to my destination. So yeah, I'd say just probably that incident, just the 170. Um, I know some people don't like the LNER Azumas because they say that the seating's not that great, and people don't like the Voyager units on the cross-country trains. They had these four or five coach trains replacing replacing eight coach trains. The idea was that cross country Virgin would be a metro service, turn up and go, and that didn't really turn out.
On the flip side, the best train you've been on?
Oh, again, loads. I think sort of the German IC4. Sitting at the where you can actually sit at the front and actually see the cab, see the journey. I
The
think
city
also as
trains in
well.
Zurich are amazing, though, no? I remember I was in Zurich and I saw this double-decker train for the first time. Super clean, super nice.
Hmm. Yeah, I think some of them, although I think on some of the local trains that were made in the 80s, you had a three-coach train plus the engine. The engine was probably at least three-quarters the length of the carriage, and then you had one carriage, first class. So you only had maybe two second-class double-decker coaches. Fine at the time. Now, yeah, not so much. But yeah, I'd say probably there's some of the Chinese high-speed trains. Yeah.
Probably that might be the answer to the next question. The fastest train you've been on?
Yeah, certainly the Chinese train, I think the CR, can't remember, or maybe the CR 300 or 350.
I
Certainly,
think
yeah.
when I was in Shanghai, I think they have a maglev that goes from the airport to the city, right?
Yeah, they do that that as well. Although that is more or less outdated because when you get to Longyang Road, you still have to change into the metro to go to the center. When I was working in actually at my school, I was in Jing'an, so I could get the metro to the airport. And sometimes it was only 20 minutes longer if I stayed on the metro going straight to the airport. And in the grand scale of things, that 20 minutes, I was saving myself 100 RMB. And for 20 minutes, you know,
Yeah.
you have to think in the worst case scenario, you get off the train, you change, you buy a ticket, you go on the platform, and you've just missed that train, so you have to wait another 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is, yeah, probably half an hour to get to the airport, whereas Pudong, it might have been maybe 45 minutes on the metro from that station. So easier just to stay on the metro, I found, and yeah.
This high-speed train you're talking about, what type of speeds are we looking at?
Which one, the maglev or the just train up to Harbin?
The
The
train up
train
to the fastest one
Harbin,
you've been on?
I think it's probably at least, yeah, I think around 350 kilometers an hour.
It's like a Formula One car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, this might be very debatable, but the best underground rail system.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'll probably actually answer a different question. My most memorable underground system, and that was the one in Santiago in Chile. Just because the metro stations, or at least on some of the lines the line that I use quite often, a lot of the stations had this sort of modern art. The stations were bright and open, modern. Compare that to sort of Buenos Aires, which was older. Buenos Aires, it was I think the first metro system in South America, so it was older and it was more, yeah, it was older. Um, you could see that in the stations as well. But again, both systems were still well kept. Um, I'd say that people might think the Chinese systems or the Chinese metros are modern or the best. But the problem is when you've got some stations that are so big where it takes you 15 in Jing'an Temple, for example, 15 minutes to change lines. It's easier just to take a taxi. If you consider walking to the station, the metro journey, changing, traveling on the metro, and then walking home, whatever, is easier just to jump in jump in a taxi. Yeah, God, how could I forget Moscow? I mean, sort of the art in some of the metro stations in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Moscow, of course, built built by sort of prisoners, basically, political prisoners. That's how it was built. But yeah, Moscow, I'd say, is certainly an impressive system. I think you've been there as well, so yeah, and the fact that the system continues until 1 o'clock in the morning. Um, Whereas in, Shanghai, the system closes, I think, at about 10:30. So
Wow.
it's not that good if you're going sort of to the pub, or, you want to leave the pub at 11 because you want an early night. It's just not a That's why I hardly ever use the system in Shanghai, actually.
The longest train journey you've been on?
That was stopping and starting, but that's probably Moscow, Vladivostok. Of course, that was with a lot of stops on the way. The longest continuous journey has probably been Moscow, Zurich. That was either possibly changing trains in Vienna, um, yeah, changing trains in Vienna, or Berlin or Paris, I think once, just because, yes, I could have got off earlier in the early hours in Frankfurt or Strasbourg, but getting to Paris at 7 in the morning was probably more practical. And then jumping on the TGV at 8, I was in Zurich by about probably midday or something, or at least at my dad's at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So yeah, that's probably the longest journey. It's probably been Moscow to Zurich via some sort of route.
A train station that you particularly love?
I'd say Prague, Praha Hlavní nádražní. I think it's my favorite. Just a very classic station. London St Pancras as well, just sort of that sort of Gothic style, and yeah, I miss how St Pancras was before without the Eurostar, but then it was a station that was falling to bits. It was a railway line that was seeing a lot of not really invested as much. The Midland Main Line, no disrespect, but where did it go? Nottingham, Derby, and Sheffield. Hardly prestigious places compared to York, Edinburgh, Glasgow, or on the West Coast. Um, a lot of the urban centres on the West Coast, Birmingham, the West Midlands, so Birmingham, Coventry, Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Manchester, and the Northwest Conurbation, Liverpool, Chester, Holyhead, and then of course up the Lake District, Carlisle, and Glasgow Central, and Glasgow as well. So yeah, and then you had the Midland Main Line. That's not, yeah, Sheffield, 2.5 hours in Sheffield. Yeah. So yeah, I'd say St Pancras. Certainly the regeneration was needed. Paddington's a nice station as well, Paddington. But yeah, in Europe, Antwerpen in Belgium, Antwerpen Central, Prague, Leipzig as well, Leipzig and Dresden. Those stations are nice. Budapest, Keleti, Budapest East, that's also a nice station as well. And Zurich as well. What I like about Zurich, it's a wide station, so you can stand at the end of the platform, taking pictures of the trains coming in, focusing on the point work. And I think I did get some good pictures once at sunset as well.
Mm.
So yeah, I'd say state. Yeah, so if a stage has an atmosphere or good for photography, then yeah.
This next one
Whereas
might
in
be
China,
tough.
so
Oh,
whereas in China, sorry, I find the stations very functional. You go in, get on the train, that's it.
mhm. Next one might be tough. I don't know. Maybe you'll have an idea. The most impressive buffet car or restaurant carriage that you've seen or been in?
Um, Again, sort of a difficult one, but I'd say certainly, from traveling in Russia, that you can jump on the train and often have a good meal on the trains. On the Moscow, Nice, Moscow, Warsaw, Moscow, Paris train, the Polish Railways put on a very good buffet car, restaurant car. So you can get like a really, really good meal. Starters with some, for example, pierogi, and then yeah, having some really good food as well. So yeah, I'd say Polish railways. I'd say some of the Russian railways are probably up there as well. Um, the Chinese on the classical train, they you know they do some good food. It's sort of freshly cooked as well. The Chinese high-speed rail, they do sort of a good selection of food, but it's very much meat, rice, emphasis on the rice, not on the meat. So, you know, it can be sort of quite heavy when you're sitting on a long journey. But yeah, I'd say certainly, I'd say, yeah, so the Czech railways, when you're traveling in the Czech Republic, they have a happy hour. So happy hour, so you
Oh.
can get like 50% off the beer or whatever. But yeah, I'd say Czech railways, Hungarian railways, I had some sort of good meals, more so in like Central Europe rather than Western Europe. So yeah, some good meals I think on Czech railways, Polish railways, Hungarian as well.
And finally, without swearing, some words for people who think that your interest is weird or boring.
I have a life. What do you have? You know, that is, you know, I mean, people who like to say, oh yeah, those rail enthusiasts. Well, what do you do? You know, people who just spend their time, you know, watching cat videos on Instagram, on Facebook, you know, people who just spend their time looking at their phone rather than looking at the world around them. I would say, you know, just get a life basically. And
Yeah, I think
if your life is playing football, great. But yeah,
I think anyone who watches Love Island has no right to criticize anyone else's interest.
yeah, Love Island, The Only Way is Essex, like these sort of I don't even know what the concept is. It's like this sort of it's like an exaggerated version of themselves, basically. Yeah, I mean, one thing's a fine is that, you know, yeah, we have more TV channels, but do we really have the quality that we did 30 years ago? You know, just look on, you know, look on Saturday night TV. It's not as good as it was before. You know,
Yeah.
there are reasons for that. People don't watch TV as much as they did 30 years ago. And of course, you know, you've got the Sky channels, download it, Sky channels with films. You've got Apple TV, you know, downloading films. You've also got catch-up TV as well. So, you know, it's not, you know, you don't really need to watch EastEnders the moment it's on. You can just sort of catch up or watch it online, you know, watch it on the bus with your headphones on. Yeah, yeah, things are changing.
Well, that's a topic for another podcast. But thanks a lot for coming on, Mark, and talking
No
about
worries.
this interest that you have. I found it really interesting, and I'm really impressed by just the amount of knowledge you have, like even knowing like Neath to Swansea. I think, you know, knowledge is always a good thing, and expanding your knowledge base on anything can only be a positive, no?
Yeah, sure, sure. Okay,
Thanks a lot, Mark.
okay. Cheers. No worries.
I wish you